tension, based on real events. My name is Saparbek, from a small village called Tomoyu. My parents asked me to check on our old house. It had sat empty for almost 2 years. I went alone, cleaned up, and by evening I turned in. That night I heard heavy, measured footsteps in the yard. I told myself it was just livestock, nothing unusual out here. The next day I stayed again. Rain came at dusk and everything went quiet. Near 3 a.m. I was on the phone with a friend when I clearly heard Hooves. Confident, steady, as if something was walking right beneath my window. "Do you hear that?" I asked. "Yeah," she said. "Maybe a cow?" I stepped out with a flashlight, no one there. But the air smelled of wet wool and iron. And in the mud around the house were crescent prints that appeared and then broke off across the clean concrete. The feeling that something was watching from the dark wouldn't leave. In the morning a neighbor said, "When a house sits empty, they come. Read a surah before you sleep." I did. That night I dreamed a shadow stood at the window. It didn't knock. It breathed on the glass, and damp crescents bloomed there like hoof marks. A muffled, foreign voice, like it came from the soil, said, "Open." I woke slick with cold sweat. The latch scraped 3 times, and my phone flickered 3:03 before the screen went black. I called my younger brother and his friend so I wouldn't be alone. They brought a game console and stayed till morning. We played, but every few minutes we heard slow pacing beneath the window, like footsteps in wet earth. At one point the friend shook me. "Hey, do you keep a cow here?" "No." "Then who's been circling all night?" The curtains stirred without a draft. The light flickered, and the console paused itself at 3:03 on the dot. We left at dawn, and no one's gone back since. Sometimes, when I think of that house, I hear that same measured tread, as if something stayed behind to pace the yard with hooves, circling the house and counting steps. And every count starts again at exactly 3:03. Next scary story. My brother and I lived in a village and headed up to the Zilau to bring our rams down. We set out at night over 20 kilometers of slope and steppe. Midway he suggested we camp, but we wanted to push on. By evening we realized we wouldn't make it. Night fell, the world went still. We pitched a small tent right on the hillside. 3 shepherd dogs and an alibi were with us, solid, reliable. My brother fell asleep at once. I couldn't. The air felt too cold, like it leaked up from the ground. My phone showed SOS instead of service, and the time flashed 12 o'clock, as if someone had flicked the hands backward. Around 3:03 a.m. The dogs began to whine, then all at once lunged and barked at a single spot, where the slope dropped into darkness. One shepherd burst into the tent, pressed into me, and trembled so hard the zipper chimed. Something paced in circles outside. Step, pause, step, pause. The guy lines stretched, stakes tinked, the fabric creaked. The air smelled of wet wool and iron, as if damp metal lay hidden in the grass. The tent wall pushed inward like a palm with long fingers. Once, twice. Then a dragging, rasping, inhuman voice spoke right at the zipper. "Come out." It was double-layered, as if it spoke from both sides at once. My throat closed. My whole body shook. My brother sat up, glanced at his watch. The second hand ticked backward, and calmly began to pray. Something slowly stroked across the dome of the tent, like it was petting from outside and waiting. The zipper tugged itself 3 times. The tent was nudged, then pulled from the other side. A shadow slid across, and something tapped the pole, dull, measured 3 times like a knock. The dogs growled low, holding the line. The alibi stood outside like a wall and howled like a siren. Until dawn the steps drifted away and crept back again, and only with the first light did everything go still at once. The dogs dropped to their bellies as if switched off, and the grass stopped moving. Peered out, no one there. On the ground around the tent was a perfect ring of tracks. Crescent prints like small hooves alternating with tiny bare footprints, both sets ending on a clean patch of stone. Stakes were twisted to a strange angle, and on the inside of the fabric a dark smear remained, smelling of wet copper. We packed in silence and left without looking back. We moved to the city later, but every time the wind touches a curtain, I hear that same rasp in my head, "Come out!" And my screen lights up 3:03 with no notifications at all. Next scary story. My grandfather told me this story. He spent his life in our village in the Jambal region. It wasn't about him, but about a widow who lived alone on a small farm nearby. One evening, all of her children collapsed at once. No fever, no cough, just lying there with half-open eyes and shallow breaths. The house went unnaturally quiet. The clock would stop and then tick backward, and the entryway smelled of damp and iron. By habit, she stepped outside for water. When she came back, she saw it. Something almost human and yet not. Patchy hair, a spine arched so high the shoulders rose above the head. Arms dragging to the floor, joints too many. It paced in circles around the children, muttering in a thick, gluey voice as if the throat were stuffed with wet wool. Each time it leaned close, a dull handprint bloomed from the inside of the window pane. She remembered what the elders taught. Don't be afraid. Take the Kamcha whip and recite a surah. She snatched the whip from the wall, stepped forward, and fisted a lock of its hair, lashing across its shoulder. The thing screamed so loud she was half-deaf for days. The sound was doubled, like it cried out both in the room and under the floorboards. It tore free and slid back into the dark, but in her hand she still held a long black lock, wet and heavy like river weed. From that night on, she tied the lock above the threshold and read over it each evening. The thing returned, coming up to the door and standing in the dark. Only bare feet showed on the step, turned the wrong direction for a face. It never crossed the threshold, as if the hair bound it outside. A week stretched like that, whispers under the windows, scratches along the jamb, and the children slowly began to breathe deeper, drifting back toward waking. One evening she was exhausted and forgot to read. The night was windless. Around midnight, the loop holding the lock gave a small tug, as if pulled from below, and the hair vanished. The door never creaked. No one entered. But at dawn, a thin stripe of mud lay across the sill, as if something had stepped out from inside. The children recovered, and the widow only said, "Now I know. Whatever came here was once a person." Since then, folks in our village cover mirrors at night and never go out bareheaded. That iron smell can find its way back. Thanks for watching until the next scary stories.